Well, it's time now for Media Watch with Emma James. Emma, you're starting tonight with that charm offensive being launched by the British Prime Minister in the French Riviera.
Yes, absolutely. And it almost sounds like it could be the name of a movie, at least if you say it with a French accent. Brexit in Brégançon. It kind of sounds romantic, but probably isn't in reality, I think it's fair to say. The UK Prime Minister, the latest in a series of British politicians to come here to France. She's actually interrupting the French president's time away at his summer retreat in Brégançon for discussions ahead of what is described as a friendly dinner. Now, the British cartoonists have been having an awful lot of fun with this particular meeting. Nobody seems to have any great optimism for it. Bob Moran in The Telegraph has Theresa May drawn as a French poodle, and she's attached to the leg of Emmanuel Macron, who is simply saying non, while holding the paper that she hopes will be the UK's plan to exit the European Union. This is another offering from a British cartoonist, Christian Adams, earlier this week. This was from the Evening Standard, and you have Theresa May begging on her knees on a very small island with the flag Brexit, and Emmanuel Macron looks like he's having absolutely none of it. This one comes from The Times, Morton Morland. Why not let me use the stairs, she asks. I cannot offer the unilateral concessions, says Emmanuel Macron. Now, when you look at the actual articles that have been printed and been written around this, it's not much less gloomy in terms of how successful this meeting is likely to be. This is a particularly strange offering in The Times. The headline seems to be quite different to the rest of the article, I have to say. Macron needs to sort out our Brexit mess, says Philip Collins. Whether he actually needs to or not is another matter, because Emmanuel Macron really doesn't have that much of a vested interest, certainly not as much as the people of the United Kingdom. And people are asking, why has this writer particularly put the onus on Emmanuel Macron? In the article, it paints him really as UK's Obi-Wan Kenobi, i.e. he is the only one who can help. Philip Collins writes, the Chequers plan is on life support. No Deal Leavers has a plan, but it is a disaster. It is time that Mr Macron sorted this out for us. I'm not quite sure that that's going to happen, and neither is this Twitter user. The Chequers plan isn't worth saving, and Macron will be a fool to try. I doubt he's going to waste time on Theresa May's self-serving twerpery. Not entirely sure that's a word, but we'll let him get away with it for now. The Telegraph has this, where Emmanuel Macron will say non to Theresa May's Brexit overtures. Really not very, although it's a fairly Brexit-friendly newspaper, they basically see the idea of a cost of a no deal being seen very differently by the two leaders. Basically, Theresa May is trying to say, help me out, because if you don't, what follows me will be worse, whereas France is actually more concerned about the overall knock-on effect on the EU as a whole. In the Evening Standard, they are, as many are, reporting the words of Lord Peter Ricketts, who is Britain's former ambassador to France, and a very interesting voice to be heard on this issue. When asked if this was a key moment for Brexit, he basically doesn't believe that Emmanuel Macron will ever break rank with Brussels. And even if he was prepared to, why would he want to? Because he is, of course, very passionately pro-European. Is it any more optimistic on this side of the channel? Well, a little bit. Le Point says that Theresa May isn't quite in the same peril as certainly the British papers would have you believe. And they don't actually think that the purpose of this visit is to make Emmanuel Macron put pressure on the European Union. They say they're just shoring up relations, and that's going to be good for everybody. It sounds a little bit naive, but I'm not sure if that's just because I'm used to the very, very strong, damning rhetoric that we're getting in the British papers, where panic really is palpable nowadays. Le Monde reports on this too, saying the atmosphere will be relaxed, but the discussions will be serious. Interestingly, while the UK seems to hope that Emmanuel Macron can work his magic to secure the UK a better deal, Le Monde actually seems to believe that he and France as a whole is more of an obstacle to a more flexible solution. So very, very different takes depending on which side of the channel you are reading the newspapers. Interestingly, here in France, perhaps there's a little bit more optimism. These words still fresh in the minds of people. Michel Barnier writing this in Le Figaro yesterday, talking about the desire for an ambitious partnership with the UK post-Brexit. He says they've agreed on 80% of the Brexit deal, only leaving 20%, but of course those are the thorniest issues, the hardest to solve. He has said this before though, but interestingly, at the end of this article, he says the future partnership will be a door and ambition without precedent. So unusually optimistic words there from Michel Barnier.
But the general consensus seems to be that this trip to the French Riviera perhaps won't be so successful for Theresa May. Well, Emma, there's a rather sinister twist to one story doing the rounds on social media. I believe it relates to a painted zebra.
Yes. Now, you may remember, it was only just over a week ago, believe it or not, that the rather dubious looking zebras appeared on social media, quickly went viral alongside a rather bemused tourist. This is Mahmoud Sahan, who visited the government-owned International Garden Park in Cairo and posted these images, supposedly of the zebra enclosure. But as you will see, they are actually donkeys who have been painted to look sort of like zebras. Everybody loved this story and the images went far and wide. But now the zookeeper who actually did this has been referred to the public prosecutor. He's out of a job. Mohammed Sultan is the man who is the head of specialised parks in Cairo. He says the keeper has tarnished the reputation of the park and Egypt as a whole, and that faking a zebra is an unacceptable act. Now, funnily enough, in the first instance, Mr. Sultan actually tried to deny that any such deception had taken place, saying that these were zebras, not donkeys, and that we were wrong. But he is now due to stand trial, faced with damaging Egypt's reputation.
Looks like fairly damning evidence against him.
Absolutely.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us. That's Emma James with Media Watch.